Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the Sign Hub today at European Sign Expo. If you haven't been before, I'm James Matthews-Paul. I'm the editor-in-chief of Output magazine. We're based in the UK, and we are a pan-European magazine that covers sign making, print, digital signage, emerging technology, and the design principles that carry them. And today's session is really going to start to talk about design. We have noticed that there is a trend of more old-fashioned sign principles coming back into play. We're seeing more videos on YouTube of people sign writing. And there's a fantastic site that's getting a lot of prominence at the moment called Ghost Signs. And I've got two fantastic speakers with me today to talk about this. On my left, another stalwart of this hub is David Kynaston, who's a very experienced sign writer based in the UK, who has a lot to say on the subject. And I'm very lucky to have Roland Beemans, who's from Elements, which is a new business development company for the graphic arts. And Roland has a lot of experience in a number of different areas and has a technical design background. So he'll give us some great perspective on a more digitized side as well. So I'd actually just like you guys just to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of a background as to who you are and what you've done. David, do you want to start us off?
My name's David Kynaston. I'm a traditional sign writer from Wales in the UK, and that means that I paint signs day in, day out. Everything I do is by hand. It might be a small, tiny little board, or it might be a large 40-foot wall, but it's all done by hand, designed and painted by myself. Thank you.
Actually, out of interest, when did you start, and what was the first sign you painted? Do you remember?
Well, I started when I was in school, and I used to paint the backs of people's denim jackets, old music groups and things like that. And then it moved on to house signs, and then I left school, and then I started just doing little signs for shops and things like that. Really, it just evolves. Anything, as long as it wanted painting, I would do it.
Fantastic. And Roland, give us a little bit of your background.
Well, my background is in software development, actually, so color management, color separation. But I've been working to drive digital machines, printers, routers, engravers. And I've been a marketing director for an ink manufacturer and for hardware. My background is actually in the School of Arts, so I've been a dabbling graffiti guy when I was in my hip-hop days. And so I'm really fond of doing the right designs and the right artwork things.
Good. Very good. And in terms of the design that we use for sign and display, what do you think of it? Do we have a generally good standard of sign and display design coming out of the industry?
It used to be a little bit better because what you see now is that everybody can make their own photos. Everybody has the tools to do their own things, so it has two sides to it. One is you have more creativity from people that otherwise wouldn't have the access to get stuff out there. But there's also a large portion of people that just brings out stuff that I would name silly names for.
It's a very good point. I mean, because on one hand, we can do more than we ever have done before with sign design. On the other hand, are we losing some of the principles of good design? Because it's a little bit like photography, isn't it? Now you've got so many digital cameras, it's all point and click. Do people just expect that if you've got this apparatus that you can therefore just make something? Are we losing good design skills and design principles?
In some parts, yes. I've been trained to work with Photoshop and Illustrator to make designs. And now it's easier without having any proper knowledge to create something. But that also means that someone is going to use a typeface that original designers would look at with, oh my God, it's really bad. But sometimes it turns into something novel, where you have traditional trained people seeing that thinking outside the box gives you a new kind of artwork. If you look at the street art, for instance, you see a lot of people imitating Banksy, or looking at murals, or seeing the 3D painted stuff on the streets, and it drives new people into design of it. So that's a good thing.
I think that we're seeing a lot more keenness for handmade. Even though we can do so much with digital technology, there's new materials, there's new ways of coming at design. David, I mean, we're seeing a lot more traction on the internet, aren't we, for much more old-fashioned processes. Use of gold leaf, for example. The fact that you're getting a lot of attention around these faded signs from yesteryear. Do you think that those principles are still relevant?
Oh, absolutely. I think more and more people have got a little bit of a nostalgic feel. I think I'm afraid they have had the market saturated with too much design, too much input from digital cameras, too many fonts, too much clip art. Everything is getting thrown all together in one go, and we're just sort of looking back. People are looking back at old nostalgic things and thinking, wait a minute, we're going a bit mad with all this. We need to look back at these and think, well, these people, they simplified things a lot more. They kept it a lot simpler. They didn't use photographs, they used pictures, and that was a big thing. That was a lot more appealing to see a picture as opposed to a photograph. A photograph's an easy option. If a photograph goes through Illustrator and it's cleverly worked, that's a different thing again. But a lot of the time they're not. So absolutely, to go back and do simplify things and look how our predecessors used to do this is the way forward, really. I think, yeah.
And do you think the growth of mass production, especially, I mean, more displays maybe than signs, but the growth of mass production, has that made what you do? Because everything that a sign writer does, I suppose intrinsically, if it's handmade, it's a one-off, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Has that actually provided a counterpoint to make what you do more valuable?
I think it has, really, because what we see isn't, as a sign writer, your work is still personal. People see your work and they know you have done it. It's your hand, really, you know. So, but if people are using, let's say I designed a font, anybody can use that then, and it becomes, I sometimes say, the new Helvetica, because it gets overused all the time, and we still need these personal touches as much as possible. No disrespect to Helvetica or mass-produced things like that, but they do, as we all know, they get overused, and we get bored of them, we're tired, and we need to move on. And we've got in such a routine like that.
Yeah, as long as it's not a Comic Sans, then...
Oh, don't. I mean, we could almost call it the keep calm and carry on effect, couldn't we? I mean, yep. It's a wonderful story. Basically, keep calm and carry on was a sign made by the British government in the 1940s, and it was in case the Nazi German army managed to land in Britain and take it over. And it was meant to be a government message saying, don't worry, you know, everything is okay. And someone basically found this run of posters in the back of their print shop about 10 years ago. Yeah. And that's why we see it everywhere. And we're seeing it just sort of adapted over and over again. Do you think it's since that came out that you know, we've seen more of an emphasis on traditional design principles and maybe looking backwards for inspiration in sign and display design?
Well, on that side, there's actually two things, because now it's being overused again. So it was fresh and crisp to start with, because there was a designer looking, hey, we can use this to do something new. And now you see, keep calm and rub your body. Keep calm and drink a soda. Keep calm and if you look at Pinterest, then you see a lot of that as a design statement. By individuals that find that sort of templated design and use it for themselves in their houses. They print it and hang it on the wall. So it drives it, but it's always this curious balance between when is it still design and fresh and new, and when does it become almost a commodity. So in that respect, I like the idea. You see a lot of people now, like T-shirts, where people would say screen printing is dead, and you see a lot of youngsters that rediscover that they can make their own shirts. So their creativity goes into making something that will stand the test of time, because it's an original.
That's a really, really good point. And actually, social media is, and Pinterest and these image-based platforms in particular, are really helping us showcase I guess the arts and crafts market, which then leads people into this area of sign and display, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think You see, I think one of the reasons why there's so many people wanting to do this, they see the arts and crafts, they see things like that, and there's so many youngsters who they want to express themselves with art. They've got tired of working on computers. They're in mundane jobs, and I mean, at the same time, there's tattoo artists popping up everywhere. So it's people thinking, well, what do? We need to paint something. We've got to do something. We can paint things on the pavement, and that's fun, but we can't earn a living. What is there a commercial outlet? Okay, well, there's tattoos or painting signs. That looks a cool thing to do. So there's outlets like that for them still.
And if you look at initiatives like in Philadelphia, where you have the murals that have been a great part of the cityscape, is now turning also in developments to help people that are less fortunate to reach out into their creative self, and they provide a means to build social cohesion. So it's not just doing a design. It can be more than just a design because it goes back into the society. It can make a statement. I told you I was in my hip hop days doing a little bit of graffiti art. It is about self-expression, and there's a whole crowd of people that drives you to become better at it, because else you're going to be a white wall again, and then someone else comes to make a better piece.
Great.
We've got, I mean, we're seeing so much. I'm going to go back to this point about saturation. We're almost saturated with displays and with advertising these days, aren't we? Everything is trying to get our attention. And it's actually really the handmade, old-fashioned stuff. I mean, picking up on what you've both said about street art. We talked a little bit in a previous session about those fantastic 3D trompe-l'oeil kind of, I guess, how would you put it?
Pavement art.
Sorry?
The pavement art.
Yeah, pavement art, where it looks like someo's drawn a chasm.
Incredible.
That's all done with chalk by hand.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it's a temporary thing, of course. It is temporary, and people have to stand at exactly the right position with the cameras. But the point is, the people who do that could turn themselves to be perfect commercial artists. They probably aren't. They probably got a good 9 till 5 job or whatever. It's mundane or whatever. But we have a huge amount of artists out there who are able there. And I mean, for my job, I'm a sign writer, and I want to look after my customers, but I'd rather see more and more coming back. There's a massive amount of work for people there. That's why I'm enjoying doing my workshops and training people so that they can get out there and they can learn this and get a little bit of that decorative sort of art back, which is really functional at the same time.
Well, if you look at Behance as an example, where you have a lot of those artists that have their proper job, and then they still want to do their own thing.
Yep.
And then they're selling into a sort of a new channel where they can become commercially on their own as an artist, instead of just working for a commission.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch a little bit on ghost signage. It's still the same kind of thing, really. We've got, all these printed displays, everything trying to get our attention. But actually, people are noticing things from the past, like relics, really, aren't they? So, ghost signs were generally painted towards the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. There's a very famous one near where I live in Brixton, in London, which is a great big Bovril sign. And that's basically faded back into the building. We're also seeing, the signs for, say, cigarette companies, for tailors, these massive, all this enormous lettering that's on the sides of these buildings. And it's almost like a little treasure hunt now, isn't it, to find something like that? What have you noticed in terms of ghost
without
signage?
a doubt, I think it's just become fashionable. People are cottoned onto it. Sam Roberts, who I do run the workshops for, he runs a company called Ghost Signs. And he started getting a few photographs of this, just like a lot of people. He thought, well, that's interesting. I'll take a photograph of that, Started up a little bit of a blog, Facebook. Other people sent him photos. It's evolved now that he does walking tours around London. He's got a better rating than the walking tours around Windsor Castle. And he's got a huge TripAdvisor rating as well. And people just love it. Sam's a good talker. He can explain about all these signs. How the sign painters used to go up there and paint them and use the different brick courses as guidelines, and it's a huge art, and I think more and more people are noticing them and realising what a lovely form of advertising this really was, and how nice to bring it back. And even firms like Coca-Cola have decided to employ sign writers to start where they can paint some of these wall signs back because it was just such a fantastic, appealing bit of advertising, really. Much needed again, I think.
And Roland, have you seen, does that exist on the continent as well?
Yeah, if you look, I come from Eindhoven, and you had a lot of old Philips buildings, so industrial buildings, and where the city used to say, let's tear them down and redevelop the whole area, they kept the original buildings now. So there's this feeling of going back into time when things were better or more beautiful. So there's this feel of, what's it called, genuinity?
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia.
Yep.
Authenticity.
Yeah, authenticity. Because everything can be really smooth with what you see in sign and display, but then it's perceived as just trying to sell something. Whereas the old-fashioned murals are being perceived as a work of art. So people stop and look at it and then think, oh wow. And like what you said, in the Netherlands you also have tours of people finding those places, and then it becomes storytelling, which is better than just selling something. It is explaining something of the past, explaining something of how it is done, and then you see the connections of how a city was developed and evolved into what it is today.
I wonder if the inheritor to that is really graffiti. Because I mean, it's the same principle. You're painting something onto a wall. It's actually become a hell of a lot more accepted now, hasn't it? And it's recognised almost as an art form in its own right. I mean, obviously the purpose is very different, but it's are the two things linked in some way?
Yes.
Especially in the way that we talk about them, promote them on social media, and that they are sort of fetishized by a younger audience.
In practicality, there's a difference between a commercial painting and an artist painting. In the Netherlands at some point, and I was at fault for that as well, we just sprayed on walls because we wanted it. And then the shop said, well, it's garbage. At least make it my sign. So I even got paid a little bit for some shops where I did a graffiti thing, and it turned into a commercial thing. So it is interlinked, and now you see, I have a daughter. She's now 11. She was on a birthday party somewhere where a graffiti artist teaches children to do graffiti on a sign, and they can take it home to hang it on the wall. So it's not a print; it's an original children's drawing, but based on the design essentials of those old graffiti masters, which I think is really cool.
Great.
Do you see some crossover as well in the interest in, say, the workshops that you run? People coming from that kind of graffiti space now realising that there can be a professional career for them that is linked to that.
Yeah, it's in a way. I mean, it's always been a bit of an aim for me, really. I've seen graffiti art, and I've never studied it, and I've never been a fan of graffiti, which has been almost like vandalism type graffiti. I appreciate graffiti where it's done in the right place, but I wouldn't want to see graffiti on the side of my house. So, okay. So, but I've always appreciated graffiti, and I've always thought some of these people are fine artists. They could make fantastic sign writers, and I almost want to try and find them, grab them, and say, look, I've got a job for you. You could be doing this. You could be earning a proper living. You could be making this town, your town, look so much better for it. You know, look into it. Think about it. So, absolutely, yeah, it's there.
And there's also the opportunity to cross over into statements, making a statement. In my local area at the moment, Network Rail, the UK Rail Authority, is trying to kick out a lot of independent businesses from some railway arches. And it's been a really, really big deal because they want to move, all of the big kind of mega corporates in there, and it's really not the feel of the space. And what they've actually done is they've got some graffiti artists from the local area to paint on all of the shop shutters, and each one has a different identity. And actually, quite a lot of the graffiti artists have used kind of retro models, retro design as a way of getting that across. And they've actually become really appreciated by the community, these murals. So I wonder, is the difference between street art and fine art and signage, or is it all coming together somehow in the modern day?
Yeah, I think we have got a good relationship between all of them, and I think that's the best way. And You know, I mean, I used to do a lot of airbrush work on my signs, and I used to think, well, if I do too much airbrushing, it looks a bit graffiti, really. So, of course, there is all that sort of relationship, really, and to bring it all together and relate it all is perfect. And you know, who am I to say that my signage is right, but a graffiti person isn't right, or a vinyl person isn't right, or a digital? You know, we all have our ideas. Our customers have our ideas of what looks right, and I think if we can work together, it's always the best, of course.
You know, is it a case then of taking some of these people that are inspired by either old-fashioned or you know, these street art type pieces? Is it a case of trying to encourage them into more education where they can get some of the design principles and bringing them into the industry that way?
Yeah, possibly. In some cases, yes. If I relate it again to that music thing, you have your own artist feel of what you want to do, and that's different in some cases where you have to work on a commission, where you are within the boundaries of what you need to do. So people want to express themselves. So then art is art because it was meant as art. And then there's people making beautifully designed stuff that wasn't supposed to be art. So there's a difference in that approach, but helping them with teaching them base principles to make it better is always a good thing. If I relate it to FESPA here, workshops would always encourage people to learn new things. So organizations like FESPA could sort of push that forward. If you see car wrap, it's always crowded at car wraps. Why? Because there's someone doing something with a technique that someone else said, I learned from that. So like the graffiti artist that now is teaching children to do something, inspires them to do their own stuff as well. So I think, yes, teaching could be very beneficial.
Okay. And I mean, out of interest, do you think that we should have more representation of manual processes on the floor at FESPA? I mean, we're in European Sign Expo. I think it's great that FESPA is making more of this event, and it is growing year by year. But on the other hand, you know, would you like to see some more hand painting, maybe sort of more suppliers to your industry coming onto the show floor here?
Well, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, it's for me, it's a bit of a shame. You know, who would have thought in this day and age we go to a sign show and it's not represented with sign writing. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, everything was hand painted. It's incredible. But I mean, it's come back as a serious thing. And this is my first year here. And, you know, I hope we can sort of develop this where we can move on and we can have an ongoing demonstration. We can have something where people can put an overall or a bib on. They can have a go and just keep going, whether it's a mini workshop, and just keep trying out and have some serious. So it's not a novelty thing. It's a serious thing, because for us, this is a serious industry. We earn our livings doing this, and we have serious clients, serious customers, and it's every day. And we'll probably be in this for a lot longer than most people. I know sign writers who've been doing it for a lifetime. I've been doing it for 27 years. There's every reason why I can just keep carrying on in just the same way I am, really.
Do you think what part of it is that you know, back in the old days, a sign was a sign.
Yep.
You know, it was there as a statement. I am James. I am a tailor. We are a men's outfitters, women's outfitters. Come and buy our stuff here. You know, these are our opening times.
Yep.
That was a sign, wasn't it? You know, these days, is it too confused? We're talking about brand, then we've got displays. You know, there's a split between decoration and function that I think is maybe confused. Do we just need to get back to some good old-fashioned signage?
We do. We need to look at our predecessors and see how they did it and try and learn from them. There's too many people who are just, they put the clip art down, they put the colours down, they put the fonts down and everything. They've no idea what they look like, and all the digital photographs, and think, well, it's got to look right. But if you stand back and you look at it, you can't even read what the message says on a lot of them. And we need to look and think, well, why did that old sign look good? Why did that look slightly, and what was the simplicity? What was it? There isn't too many colours, there's just a nice little picture, but it looks fantastic, and that's what we need to look at and just stop thinking that everything's just got to be thrown at it.
Do you think that we need to split better the definition of what a sign is and what a display is, maybe?
No, I wouldn't set that kind of rules because people will not follow them anyway.
That's true.
What I do think is if you look at the United States as an example, where there's still a lot of handcrafted signs, which is very different from here in Europe. I would love to have a lot of that back into the streets because it gives this sort of authenticity that someone actually paid for an artist to make something, to spend time on it, instead of pushing a button and a print rolls out. I would predict it's the same thing with vinyl. People were saying vinyl is dead, and now you see the revival of vinyl records, and I think it's the same thing with signage. There will always be this, what's it called in English?
A bell curve.
A waveform where it's very popular, then it's too much, so it will decline. And at some point, people will rediscover that there was some sort of beauty and truth in it. So it will always survive. Making rules out of it, that doesn't work.
I'm going to pick up on a point you've made there. I think that there's also something to be said about the value. I remember being in a shop in Brighton earlier this year where they're actually selling old signs from the London Underground. My mum was telling me that she went to Vegas and there's a place called the Neon Graveyard where they have all the old neon signage. And there's a similar gentleman in London who sells that. I mean, obviously it's hard for you to place a value on your work at the time, but we are seeing this. These old signs do have a value, and they're actually now commodity pieces, aren't they?
Yeah. I think that's how I'll retire. Sell all my old signs off. That sounds good. But yeah, I think so. I think people just love to see a bit of commercial art. They like to see that it's done by hand. They're not used to it in this day and age, and I think that's absolutely right. They're just a bit shocked. I work doing shop fronts and things like that, and people just stand there and they say just that to me. We didn't realise it was done by hand. We see it, but we just never sort of realise it. And they say to me sometimes, they say, well, why are you doing it by hand? Well, you can do it with all my machine, or you could do it. Well, I said, because I can. It's as simple as that. I said, that brush can do every font you want it to or whatever. And it's not difficult to learn, and I just try and stress them. So why have we gone away from it? Why do we all of a sudden we think, oh, we don't need this anymore, when we can still do it? It's still there. It's fine. It's natural to me, but maybe not to many others.
So maybe sort of starting to wrap up, is it, in order to move forward in a way, do we need to look backwards?
Well, always. You know where you're going when you know your history. So for instance, if you look at a show like this, you see now all the deco printed textiles in frames, and it is big, and then at some point someone invents something new, and that's the next big thing. People could argue that, for instance, flags is something of the past, and yet they're still there. So if you know why a flag is a flag to catch the attention, and it's the same thing here. If you catch the attention, then that's the intrinsic value of what you put on the wall, on a pole, or on the floor.
I think you're right. I mean, back in the old days, they didn't think, oh, this is a new technology. They did that because it was the thing that worked, wasn't it? And those principles are never really going to change, are they, David?
Yeah. No. I mean, they always had different ways. We were I was with my dad last night in a lovely restaurant opposite the cathedral here in Cologne, and there's beautiful tin signs, posters all over the walls. But some of the tin signs, I said to my dad, look at them. They were domed. There were signs about that, and they had a dome on them. So they obviously would have been in some sort of a press. And that was just another way to attract the attention. As much as nice as they were, they thought, well, if they're domed like that, the light hits them better. People see them before they see the next thing. So they were always looking at other ways. So that's not new. We've always been looking at other ways of attracting it more and more. Even if it's come down to neon signs with people flashing and pointing and all that sort of thing. That's what it's all about. We've got to get the viewer to look at the sign, to buy the product, to keep the customer happy, to keep us in business.
And that can come from a number of different ways. So I'd just like to say, are there any questions maybe from the audience? Don't all shout at once.
I think it's pretty clear, right?
I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you ever so much. David, Roland, thanks very much for being here today. Thank you all for listening. It's been another great session at the Sign Hub at European Sign Expo. I'm sure our panelists will answer any questions if you want to ask privately, but otherwise, have a great day and enjoy the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess we're not going to sing a song then.
No, I think we better leave
And we're
that
not-
back.
not
The
dancing.
camera's still on, so...
We were waiting for them to ask us to sing a song, weren't we?